Welcome back, everyone. If you've been working with me all the way through the pre-scene videos, we've been through the whole of the pre-scene. We've analysed everything throughout each of the different sections. We've looked at the F3 analysis and done all the financial analysis. We've looked at the risk analysis and done P3. And now what we're going to do is we're going to bring everything together into a full strategic analysis. We're going to do a Porter's 5 forces and a Pestel analysis and a SWOT analysis and an Ansov's matrix and a Mendelow's matrix and many more of the other strategic analysis models. We're going to bring all that together at the end to decide how are we going to take this business forward. And I'll give you my view on how I would take this business forward, and you can combine that with your own analysis. Then what you can do is you can use that in the exam. So in the exam, almost certainly you'll be faced with some new issue, a new project or something like that. And what you can then do is say, well, is that consistent with Nick's analysis? If it is, then it's likely that there's some relevance to the project. If it's completely off track, then you want to question that project. Okay? Because you need to be justifying those new projects in relation to the logical strategic analysis. And really, that's what we're going to do in this video. So I'm going to take you through this. I will give you a very quick reminder of the strategic analysis models, but I won't do that in detail. You need to do your own research and analysis on the actual models in depth. But I will give you a quick overview before we see each of them. So, the case study itself, as no doubt you all know by now, it's a Google-like company who have a range of products, some cash cows, they've got some new growth products, and we're going to analyse those. It's a nice, simple, easy pre-scene to analyse in some ways because we're so familiar with Google and web search and so on. And the model that we're going to use to analyse the case is this one. It's the rational model. Again, you would have done that within your studies. And we're going to start off by taking a look at the future, the mission, the objectives, look at governance and ethics and the stakeholders to decide where do we want to take this business in the future. We'll then take a step back to say, well, where is the business now? We'll look at the business environment, do Pestel and 5 forces. We'll do product life cycle and BCG matrix and some other analysis of the business. And we'll pull all that together in a SWOT analysis so we know the current position of the business. So we know where we are now, then we know where we want to be in the future, and then we can define our business strategy to move the business forward. And we'll do that in 3 ways. We'll think about the generic strategies of cost leadership, differentiation and focus. We'll brainstorm our options using Ansov's matrix. And finally, we'll think of the methods of growth. Which of those methods is going to be the method that we will use, and therefore decide what strategies we're going to use. First off then is to think about the future. The first stage is where is this business going? So let's get straight on. The mission. Quick reminder of the mission for you. It is, what is the organisation about? Why does it exist? What's its purpose? It helps to give a common purpose to the organisation. It sets that direction so everyone is behind it. All of the staff are there behind that particular strategy. It focuses the strategy and focuses the directors when they set their goals and set their direction. What that means is that when you are setting a new, maybe you're developing a new product, you're buying a company, you can always ask, is it consistent with the strategic direction of the business? And the 4 elements, according to Campbell, that it includes are the purpose, why are we in business? The strategy, how are we going to compete? How are we going to be successful? The values, what we stand for. And the policies, specific policies for staff and customers, so specific detailed behaviours that people do. So those are the key elements. What is Look's mission like then? Well, the mission is rather broad and general. Connecting people to the world. And for me, that means it's a reasonably limited use. Remember, we want the mission to be something that directs the board, that keeps them focused. And let's say we were about to analyse a new project and we were going to assess it and we were going to say, okay, is this new product, is that going to help connect people to the world? Very hard, isn't it? We also have to ask questions about some of the products they've got at the moment. Something like Look Media. Remember, that's their TV, video production. Is that connecting people to the world? Well, perhaps it is. Perhaps we're connecting people via films and TV. And it's so difficult, though, isn't it? Because it's such a broad, generic mission statement. Not very good from Campbell's point of view. And from my perspective, then, this is a reasonably likely exam question. I've got another video in my series where I go through my top 10 questions, and one of those is mission statements and the likelihood for a new mission, because certainly from a theoretical point of view, it isn't the strongest of mission. Even if we take this slightly better, what they called the underlying intention, which is to make knowledge in almost any form instantly accessible to those using the company's services. Even then, that's difficult to apply to some products. It's quite broad, it's quite general. Again, we ask about Look Media. Well, that's not really knowledge. TV, film, that's not really knowledge, is it? Okay, there are some factual programs on there, but that's not really knowledge. So this is one of the difficulties, even when you're searching. That's not about knowledge always, is it? Depends what you're searching on, really, as to what you're trying to find, as to whether it's knowledge or not. So, okay, it's a broad guide, but certainly if we go back to Campbell's 4 elements, we'd like to have a little bit more on what their actual purpose is, a lot more on strategy and how they're going to be successful, how are they going to compete, how are they going to be achieving that, and a lot more on values. Now, we are told the ethical values, but that's not part of the current mission state, remember. So that's a slightly different thing, and a little bit on policies as well. So that could be a good relevant question in the exam. Next element then of taking the business forward into the future is to take that broad mission and get focused, detailed targets to provide motivation and to plan towards. Again, the problem in this exam is we are given few specific targets in this particular case study. There aren't really financial targets, there aren't really targets for growth or percentage targets, and my guess is that if we were to have more information, that this business would have targets. Businesses like this, huge multi-billion-dollar businesses, don't not have targets and goals and budgets and so on. If suddenly you find in the exam that they really don't, then of course that would be a huge weakness. But as it stands, they probably do. We're just not told about them. And the reality is that certainly we know that performance measurement is a big topic on the P3 exam. Also the E3, it comes into that as far as reviewing is concerned. And so this could easily be an exam topic. And a couple of things to notice about that is we've got divisional businesses here, and those divisional businesses are likely to be investment centres, and therefore return on investment and residual income are two possible ways of effectively measuring returns on investment centres. If they're not using those already, of course they should be. And of course it may well be worth your while learning your advantage and disadvantage of those techniques from your P3 revision in order to make sure you can comment on those. Now personally, and certainly if we go back, okay, we're on a new exam this time round in a new format of the case study, but if we look back over past case studies, one model that has been useful to bring up in the past has been the balanced scorecard. And remember, the balanced scorecard has got those 4 key elements to it, not just financial, but also focusing on customers, the internal perspective, and innovation and learning. And we have those non-financial measures in those areas to get this balanced view of the performance. And certainly we're not told about non-financial measures in this actual case, but certainly an improvement would be to have a balanced scorecard type approach, and that would be very suitable in this business. So that's certainly something you could consider suggesting and recommending as part of your answer. Okay, governance, key topic governance. Reason being is that there are a number of governance problems. Remember, governance is the way that we direct and administer and control the business. It's basically all about the directors and the way the director's running it, make sure that all stakeholders' needs are met. And you've seen on the screen there's a list of points from the UK's Code of Corporate Governance. And what I'm going to do is take a look at some of those ideas in relation to this business. Now, do remember, this business is not a UK company. It's just a European company. They do not have to abide by the UK Code of Governance. But we can use this one in the exam as an example. You can say, if this company were in the UK, they would have to abide by the following rules, and this is good practice. And in this case, we can go on to say they do not have enough non-executive directors, including the chair. That's 4, where there are 5 executive directors. That means the non-execs do not have enough power. They can't vote down a decision that the board are about to take. And remember, the non-execs are supposed to be independent, representing the shareholders and actually the wider stakeholder group as well. They have got an independent non-executive chairman. He is an accountant, and so is the head of the audit committee. That's good. He's very experienced. Excellent. There is an internal audit department. Excellent. That's good independent control. Allows for independent review. It's quite compliance focused. We might have other remits to the internal audit department, but no, that is a good thing. There are audit and remuneration committees. Excellent. So the audit committee looks after financial statements. They focus on risk and risk management. Remuneration committee focuses on director pay and making sure that that's fair and reasonable. Now, we do have to question the quality of some of the non-executives, however. The problem really here lies in the fact that there's no nomination committee. No doubt the NEDs are employed by the executives, and so they're choosing people favourable to them. For instance, the obvious poor recruitment of Mara, who was just a long-term employee. You think, yeah, we'll give them a nice little role to finish up as a non-executive director. Well, she wasn't really qualified. She didn't have the experience. A couple of the other non-executive directors kind of got questionable experience for such a huge company to be effective non-executives. They're not accountants. There's only one accountant on the audit committee, for instance, as one example. So that's a definite improvement that could be made. Huge governance issue is these founder shares. Founders have got 20 votes for each share, which means that when we are analysing the voting rights, we can actually see that they basically have got complete power amongst them, and they can override all of the other shareholders. Now, if I was a shareholder, I'd be very upset by that. It would mean that shareholders have got very, very low power. All the power lies with the founders, and therefore I think this is really quite a likely exam question. I've never ever in all my tens of preseens that I've seen over the last 10 years, I have never seen anything like this. And, it could just be reflective of some real world high-tech companies, or it could be a governance issue. And I think that's where the examiner's going with this. We haven't got evidence of some of the other points in the UK's governance code, like disclosures of directors' pay and financial reporting, information for directors and so on. You can see the list there. We could get more evidence on the exam, but to be honest with you, we probably won't. I do think governance is a reasonably likely exam topic, though, with a view of trying to improve the share situation. Perhaps we need to relist those founders' shares as normal shares. Perhaps we need to give them a payoff in order to do that. Or perhaps it's all part of VJ leaving, which is quite possible as well, that we bring that in. A nomination committee, perhaps changing some of the current non-execs to make them more independent, would be good elements here. Okay. Excellent. So that's governance. Ethics and CSR. Look, in this exam, ethics is absolutely crucial. In the last incarnation of the case study, we knew for a fact ethics was 10 marks. Even now, ethics is highly likely to be part of the 25 people skills mark. It was a big part of the pilot paper, where it was worth 13 people skills mark. And my expectation is the CIMA are not going to backtrack on ethics being critical. I think that you are likely to have a specific ethical requirement in this exam. We'll talk about the types of things you could have in a moment. Could it be CSR in there, corporate social responsibility as well? And so really, really critical you're prepared for these issues. So what are the sorts of issues then? Well, the obvious starting point are the 5 elements that were given to us in the ethics code. Now, in the exam, if there's an ethical problem, you can relate everything back to these 5 elements by saying, for instance, let's say there was a problem with customers. We weren't serving them properly. Maybe poor customer service in one of our business. You could go back to know one of our key elements in our ethics code is to serve the users, and for that reason we should be looking after their needs. Or respecting others. Perhaps there was an issue on staff bullying. Well, that is not respecting others, and we need to come down hard on that. Protection of privacy is throughout the case. It's mentioned in 3 or 4 places. I think the examiner is on track to test this in 1, maybe 2 of the exams. And remember, there are 5 different exams on Tuesday through to Saturday. I think this one will come up in a couple of those. Key issue throughout the case, I really do think you need to be ready to think about the ethical issues around privacy, protection of information, freedom of information. There's been a lot of issues about information and terrorism in the news very recently with what's just happened in France. So those sorts of issues, I think, are going to be key. Keeping to law, okay. Arguably, ethics should be above the law, but of course, abiding by the law is good ethics as well. I'm not sure it's quite ethics really, working in Look's best interest, but I think what we could say is that looking after shareholder needs is ethical and the right thing to do as well. In my view, there are some other likely ethics issues. Staff at suppliers is something I feel that's hinted at in the case. It is mentioned as a risk in the risk analysis, and Apple have had problems. Do have a look online at some of the problems Apple have had with their criticism of some of their suppliers and treatment of staff at suppliers, because that's been in the news a lot, and I think that will be on the mind of the examiner. I watched a UK Panorama programme just a couple of months back about this, and this is not good for their publicity, something that must be managed really effectively. Freedom of information. The rights of everyone to have free information is huge in the news at the moment, of course. And now the exams would have been written by the time the attacks in France happened, but the whole idea of free speech and so on, China restricted internet access, Google pulled out of there in 2010. For this reason, these are important issues. Generally, the environmental good, is a big part of the CSR statement. So, a tip for you in the exam, always find and take the ethical high ground. Don't go around thinking, well, this is going to cost too much, so we won't do it, even though that's ethically wrong. Or we could earn lots of money, so okay, we'll just ignore it in this case. Now, that might happen in the real world, but it will not happen in your exam, I hope, because if it does, then you won't get so many marks. Okay, so let's move on to CSR then, corporate social responsibility. And corporate social responsibility is focusing on all stakeholders. And of course, there are some specific issues in the case study as well. There's a whole range of environmental issues, even to the extent that they're investing $1.1 billion in renewable energy sources. But key focus here is that we know they take that seriously, and it's highly likely if you see an environmental issue in the exam that you will be turning around and saying, yeah, we would spend the money on that, we would do that, we would try and reduce our energy even more, and so on. That's consistent with the direction of the business and its purpose. There is some social good from some of the products. I thought in the preseen that was a bit weak, really, in a sense of, well, people are not driving as much because they don't need to go and get the information because they can get it on their computer. Well, maybe. It's not really a strong point. They're very much behind their staff and treatment of staff and local communities with schemes of scores and charitable support. They do take CSR seriously, just as they do ethics, and again come down on the right side of any issues in relation to CSR and ethics. They're important to the firm. You can justify them by these points that are on the screen here and on the ethics page, and it's also the way CIMA want you to go. Okay, they're not going to try and trick you into giving you an ethics issue that you're supposed to say, no, do the unethical thing. That's not the way the exam will go. They will always want you to do what is ethically right, what is right by the different stakeholders. Critical success factors next. Critical success factors are the key things that the organisation must do well if it's going to succeed. And these are important in this exam because if there are new strategies recommended that we have to analyse, and this is a very common kind of question in the case studies, and they will support the critical success factors, then you'll probably like to say, yes, let's go for it. If it's contradictory to these critical success factors and it's going to make them not so strong, you're going to turn around and say no. So it's very much worth your while bringing critical success factors into the discussion. So let's have a look at what the critical success factors are in my view. Absolutely critical is robust data management and the IT infrastructure. The whole of the search business, the mapping business, even the media business is dependent on that huge and speedy, excellent data management and IT infrastructure. If that fails and was down for a few days, it would be a huge reputational issue. It would affect customers worldwide. It would be a big, massive problem for the company. That must be done well. And they must protect against things like hacking and so on. We saw the issues with Sony recently. Must really manage that effectively. Next is security of data and personal information. Again, if they hold people's personal information, for instance, such as on their cloud product, and suddenly all that becomes available out there and there's a big leak of a lot of personal information, then people will lose faith in the company, will massively hit their reputation. Security, absolutely critical. R&D is vital. They spend, $9 billion on R&D each year, and they should continue investing in R&D. The reason is that they need new products. 70% of their income comes through their search and the advertising through that search. And so developing in new products in a very high-tech industry that's very fast changing is going to be critical to long-term success. When we come to the searching, that search just needs to be effective and accurate. Basically, they need to be the best search provider. The initial reason they became big was because they had a search algorithm that was better than anyone else in the market at the time. And that needs to continue to be the case. They need to look at competitors, make sure they are keeping up with the game. Produce good quality. I'm particularly thinking there about things like the mobile phones, so that the mobile phone is a high quality phone. If it was poor quality, that would be bad for the reputation. But we can go on to have things like other services they provide, information that they provide in terms of information that they hold and is online and so on. Then quality is important. Branding is critical, and that links into reputation, because people will buy, if we go back to the real world for the moment, people will buy the Google phone because it's got the Google brand on there. It's the Google Nexus, and that's the reason that they want it. And actually, they've become very well respected. I was looking around at tablets recently, and there's a new one out by Samsung. I was looking at slightly older versions, the old Asus, I think it was the Nexus 7, extremely well reviewed, really high quality. They're really trying to compete with Apple in that market. So that links into quality, but that links back to brand and the whole reputation of the company. That links back to the ethics and the CSR always being right. You could bring that up. Skilled programmers comes up in the case a number of times. I think that could be an issue in the exam, actually, as in maybe there's a shortage, or some of them decide to move on to a competitor. We lose some of those programmers. There's just too much in the case on it. It's in there in 2 or 3 places, and I'm surprised, because I wouldn't have normally thought that would be an issue the examiner would raise, but they do. It's obviously critical to their success. And so in this particular exam, then, I think the biggest hints are on the security and the skilled programmers, but of course any of those critical success factors could be examinable. Look out for them as issues. And for those of you who are watching the sample video on YouTube, then that's basically it. Okay, I hope you found this introduction to my strategic analysis useful. That's taken you through over 20 minutes of my initial analysis of the case. This whole video goes on for 1 hour and 18 minutes. You've got a whole other hour of it, and Hopefully, my hope is that you've enjoyed and got some benefit from this first part. You've seen some of my views and my perspectives, and that will convince you that it's worth going onto the website, stranty.com, and purchasing the rest of the video. Remember, you don't just get the strategic analysis video. This is one of 10 videos, 10 analysing the preseen. Not all as long as this. This is easily the longest of the videos, okay? But I've got 10 videos analysing the preseen, going into depths about my top issues, my top 10 issues, about the P3 analysis. I do an F3 analysis, looking at, on F3 I look at the financial analysis of all the numbers and benchmark it against friend time, and look at what those numbers mean. What I do on the P3 one is look at the risk analysis and go through detail the risk analysis, and I talk about controls and the way we manage those risks. You know, the risks that are in the preseen, how do we manage those risks? We do that. As well as all my models, you'll get the rest of my models, 5 forces and pest analysis and so on, that you get on this video. And my top 10 issues, you'll get my video on that. So a really detailed analysis for you then of the case. So I hope you think it's worthwhile going and getting the rest, but if not, then of course you can go through and finish off all your own analysis on the rest of the case study. Good, thank you and bye-bye.